Welcome to the Noble Ape podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today, some bad news and some good news. So let me get the bad news out of the way. Folks may remember that, I guess, for the past 18 months, maybe 2 years now, I had written for the GreyThumb blog, and unfortunately that blog disappeared without any warning a few months ago. I've tried to track down actually what went on there, and it's been kind of difficult. Folks will remember GreyThumb was a group that was started in Boston, and then through large part my own influence was then kind of cloned and transported to the Bay Area, also to London, although I think GreyThumb London predates my interaction, and also obviously Gerald de Jong picked it up in the Netherlands. There's something that went wrong kind of internally with the GreyThumb politics, and basically, I think the Boston group wanted it to be an organization that just came out of Boston. And whilst they did various relaunches or things like that, the whole thing has just gone awry. So in the short term, what that has meant is that what had been previously called GreyThumb Silicon Valley, I guess, has kind of rebranded themselves. And who knows what will happen in the future with that, but it's just kind of taken my time in recent weeks, in parallel, obviously, to this new portal site development. But what I think it has meant is that I actually quite liked having a blog. I quite liked participating through the GreyThumb blog, and irrespective of whatever the fallout was associated with the removal of the blog, and certainly not telling me or Gerald de Jong, who'd also contributed to the blog, what was happening. So I'm going to create another blog, and my thinking initially was that I had a blog previously on the Noble Ape website in the directory Hermit, and I think I might restart that because there are still folks that look for that feed. I think I only did it for a couple of months in 2007, but it gave me just another mechanism to communicate, and also the formality of recording podcasts is something that I enjoy doing, but there's also a formality associated with the editing and the production. Ironically, I have a sense that blogs are somewhat more ethereal, and the recent GreyThumb incident gives some indication that that may be the case. But certainly, when I record a podcast, it goes on the Internet Archive and it persists for an eternity, perhaps even longer than I persist for. So I have the sense when I record a podcast, there's a degree of formality in doing that, and when I write a blog entry, it's slightly less formal. But I do feel that I need something in between Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and these kind of things. Similarly, about 2005, I started developing Noble Warfare, 2004, 2005. And it's a development which I haven't really paid much attention to until recently. I was on Wikipedia looking at open source game engines, and it occurred to me that really there aren't many reasonable open source game engines out there, and particularly with regards to the kind of real-time tactical elements that Noble Warfare had, there's really nothing. The Noble Warfare source code fits very neatly into the Noble Ape Simulation framework, so I could really kind of release both things in parallel and build off the existing Noble Ape Simulation, the graphics in particular, and also I think force changes in the Noble Ape Simulation. So it seemed like a logical integration. Historically, when I started doing this in 2005, I had a blog that talked about this in the context of my life as it was moving to the US, and also the experiences in the UK, which led to the early development of Noble Warfare. And I think I could do the same thing with this blog. It will be hosted on the Noble Ape site, as I said, in the Hermit directory, and probably in parallel to actually publishing this podcast, I will set it up. But it's something that I want to document because I think the links to the artificial life community into game development in particular really need something like this. It needs existing project developers to pick up the reins and think about moving their projects in this direction. And here, again, hats off to Gerald de Jong, because I think this is what he's doing independently with Darwin at Home currently. So for me, it's just a bit of code maintenance. I moved Noble Warfare to the Noble Ape Development SourceForge directory over the weekend, relatively straightforward. There's some internal tuning. The main distinctions are the directions facing, which are primary vectors from the Noble directory in Noble Ape and now also Noble Warfare, the shared directory. That moved from being 64 points of rotation to 256 points of rotation. There are a few other court points which I wanted to basically run debugging tests on experiment with before I release it formally. But it really is getting to that stage where the Noble Ape Simulation could be released. I remember this has been a kind of perennial discussion in the recent podcasts, but it is something that I'm working towards. Obviously, also, I've had this Artificial Life community site portal development going on in parallel. I've invested about 18 hours in that already, just in the past couple of weeks to get that together. But the interesting news is that my employer is more than likely paying for a trip to the Bay Area. So I will give at least 2 talks in the Bay Area. My hope is one of those talks will be Intel, either a private Intel gathering where Apple employees can attend to, hopefully, or potentially even an RSVP'd public talk. It looks like this will probably go on in a kind of June, July timeframe, which enables me to record half a dozen more podcasts prior to this actually occurring, or at least 2 or 3. So certainly when I have firm dates, when I have firm topics, I will be announcing it through this podcast, because I know a few folks listen to Ape Reality and live in the Bay Area. This will be the first public speaking I have done since 2003, and the first public speaking I've done in Artificial Life in the past decade. So I think this probably gives some indication of, on a personal note, but I also think certainly my experience is shared by a number in the Artificial Life community. The ability to actually go to a place and talk is a luxury which many of us haven't had, certainly in the foreseeable past. So my thinking is, particularly if it's in a June, July timeframe when I do these talks in the Bay Area, there'll be potential for other talks, and whilst I have slated probably 2 days, maybe 3 days at most in the Bay Area, or possibly bumping over a weekend, I think there'll be potential for other events and other things to occur, potentially lunches, these kind of things. But it just gives me a good opportunity to meet with a community that I've interacted with in a very virtual sense over, well, at least the past 4 years through the Biota community. And in the case of the folks at Apple and Intel, I haven't met any of the primary engineers that work with Noble Ape, aside from George Warner, all the other engineers. And really we're talking about now a third generation of Apple engineers in particular that have worked with Noble Ape. So, yeah, quite extraordinary that I haven't actually met any of these folk. One of them did come to Las Vegas probably 2 years ago, that I found out after the fact. But it gives me an opportunity to not only meet these folk, but also it will be in a time frame where they give me a handover of code. The time frame for them giving this handover of code is around the same time as Apple's WWDC, so I don't know necessarily if the Noble Ape Simulation source code will be used in something specifically for WWDC. In fact, there have been no formal dates yet for WWDC, which kind of begs the question, what are we, April, May, June? So kind of 3 months away, and they still haven't released the dates for WWDC. But anyway, so I will be in the Bay Area, hopefully, pending a few minor money-related issues with the workplace. I had planned on going in September last year. I don't know if that announcement actually made the Ape Reality feed. I certainly recorded a YouTube clip associated with that. And I think probably the talks will be something similar to what I described in the September videos, some slight tuning that I passed on to a few folk. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, and certainly my anticipation is to do at least 2 talks in the Bay Area, one of which will be this new Bay Area A-Life group. I may actually be the first talk for this group, although my hope is that by going to the Bay Area and drumming up some support, that it will return to a semi-frequent meeting in whatever format that they choose, because I certainly think the movement away from GreyThumb eliminates a lot of the perspective of formality, although that had basically been removed anyway. So on a personal note, I really am quite disappointed about the whole situation with GreyThumb. I mean, if folks have followed my speaking and writing, I've certainly referenced and given a lot of publicity to GreyThumb over the past 3 years, and ultimately I think it rests with probably a couple, maybe even 3 individuals within the GreyThumb infrastructure. But from my perspective, I can't continue to promote a group that firstly destroys infrastructure, also destroys content that I've created, but more importantly really hasn't offered any support or nurturing to the external chapters. So it'll be interesting to go on the ground, meet a group of like-minded artificial life folk in the Bay Area and try to establish how these things actually work. My sense is that I could give a talk associated with that, but I'm far more interested in kind of talking more about the remote, virtual, global perspective that I have through the experiences that I've had through these podcasts and other means of getting artificial life-related information out to a broader audience. So in the short term, a blog will go up. More information associated with the integration of Noble Warfare will go up. My hope is within the next couple of weeks, the new Artificial Life portal will be launched. It's more than likely going to be Ning, N-I-N-G. I had real problems setting up the ELGG site to the point where I just thought it wasn't possible and wouldn't offer the kind of services that we needed anyway. A learning experience, expensive in time, but considerably less expensive than the GreyThumb learning experience. In the near term, a blog, in hopefully the midterm, this portal, and a new version of the Noble Ape Simulation, the new 2-window version, and hopefully in a similar kind of time frame, a similarly colourful Noble Warfare version with a lot of additional extras. If I can just talk for a minute about some of the stuff that Noble Warfare will introduce into the simulation, the first part is that I want to integrate ApeScript into Noble Warfare, so that will mean some really heavy testing, some really heavy load testing of ApeScript, but also that will require the ability for a new format to enter the file handling, a string-based format which will be useful not only for things like naming the apes, but specifically for Noble Warfare, actually pointing from the Noble Ape, or Noble Warfare in this case, saved source files to other ApeScript files, so almost like a header format. And the way all this integrates, I'm going to have a bit of a think about, but if you recall the previous podcast associated with Objective ApeScript or ApeScript++ or something like that, I think all these ideas fit together, and certainly utilizing ApeScript through Noble Warfare will push my thinking in this direction and probably create some very interesting and very optimized ApeScript editions in the near future. I also think it moves the audience of ApeScript slightly from probably what I originally estimated as half a dozen to a dozen academic users to potentially a number of tinkerers and folks who are testing out various kinds of combat and army ideas and how they can utilize ApeScript in order to do that. So an interesting experiment in terms of taking an existing simulation, which really I did in 2005 in terms of the proof of concept of Noble Warfare, but now kind of forcibly or at least maintenance-wise integrating it in the Noble Ape Simulation and doing things like parallel builds and testing of the Noble Warfare source with Noble Ape. So that's the news, and certainly I'm going to continue to produce these podcasts in a similar kind of frequency, although I think I have gotten 2 out this month, which is considerably better than my previous records. And obviously the new format, the TalkShoe format, makes these things relatively easy. I do a kind of quick crash edit and then just dump it out on the web for your listening pleasure. So if you have any questions, any feedback, any discussion points, please get in contact with me, tom@nobleape.com. I know that there are a wide variety of folks that listen to these podcasts and enjoy them, and it's always wonderful to hear from them. And similarly, the Biota podcast, I'm going to record one this Friday, so it should be out in a similar time frame. I'm also recording another new podcast, a slightly more academic artificial life-related podcast, which should be launching in the near future as well. So, yeah, lots of stuff going on. Also, the Objective-C, object-oriented programming course continues, takes my evenings, so I'm pretty well flat out currently, but the ability to talk to you all through a podcast is a luxury. So anyway, thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.